Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. I'm Jesse Waters in for Tucker. Not many people were watching Joe Biden's town hall last night. The ratings were absolutely terrible, which isn't surprising at all. Joe Biden's not capable of thinking clearly, and most Americans recognize that. So they watched football and Fox News instead. But that raises an interesting question, which until recently no one has asked. Given the obvious deterioration of Joe Biden's mind, he now struggles to form coherent sentences. Why have this town hall at all? Why not call another lid at 10 a.m. and send Joe Biden off to the farm in Delaware? One of the few people who tuned in last night, a novelist named Walter Kern, offered a possible explanation. Quote, "I've never seen anything like this," Kern wrote. "At some level, it has to be intentional. No one was clamoring for a town hall. Grave deterioration is being thrust in our face. Cooper is racing through his question as though to keep from laughing. It feels like the work of enemy propagandists." Kern made that observation in response to this clip from last night's town hall, which we promise we haven't edited in any way.
With just in terms of inflation, because you had told us at a town hall, I think it was in July, that this was just near-term inflation. The Wall Street Journal recently talked to like 67 financial experts who said that they saw high inflation going all the way or deep into 2022.
Joe Biden just stands there for nearly 20 seconds with his hands locked in the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock position. Watching that, it's hard not to wonder, did Joe Biden know where he was? Did he think he was piloting one of those old Amtrak trains right there on stage? Did he convince himself he was really back on the mean streets of Delaware, driving his 67 Stingray to a throwdown with corn pop, aviators and metal chain in tow? The road in Joe Biden's mind was obviously long and treacherous, hence the clenched grip. The moderator on the stage, as Walter Kern pointed out, tried his hardest not to notice any of this. But it was noticeable to everybody who watched the town hall last night. Joe Biden's handlers knew something like this would happen, and they sent him out there anyway. Things became so confusing for Joe Biden last night, at one point he literally stopped mid-sentence and asked, and we're quoting, "What am I doing here?"
40% of all products coming into the United States of America on the West Coast go through Los Angeles and what am I doing here?
Is it Long Beach?
Long Beach, thank you.
Obviously, it's not Joe Biden's fault he's in mental decline, but the political opportunists who made Joe Biden president of the United States, people like Jill Biden and Susan Rice and so on, are responsible for this. They lied for years about Joe Biden's condition so that they could obtain more power. Now that they have that power, they're making us aware who's really in charge. It's not Joe Biden. The point of last night's town hall was to make that undeniable. He doesn't have any comprehension of any of the problems this country's facing. Asked about the fact that hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants are entering this country unimpeded, for example, Joe Biden started lying uncontrollably. First, he claimed he's been to the border and knows it well. But there's no record Joe Biden's ever visited the southern border, not as president, not as vice president, not as senator, and not as a citizen. Today, Fox's Peter Doocy asked Joe Biden's flack about that.
There's been reporting that he did drive through the border when he was on the campaign trail in 2008, and he is certainly familiar with the fact, and it stuck with him, with the fact that in El Paso, the border goes right through the center of town.
So we looked into this. In 2008, Joe Biden flew into El Paso and then drove to New Mexico for a political rally. He never visited the border. He didn't even drive through it. If Joe Biden saw the border at all, it was in his rearview mirror. So this is just another lie. But even if you believe the lie, the White House's explanation still makes no sense. They're saying Joe Biden drove through the border one time, more than a decade ago, on his way to somewhere else. According to the White House, that means he's an expert, and he doesn't have any reason to visit the border now that he's president of the United States. This is so absurd that it's obvious no one in the White House really believes it. Again, they're rubbing this in our faces. Joe Biden is not in control. That's why none of these excuses make any sense, not a single one. At the town hall last night, Joe Biden offered a totally different explanation. He said he can't visit the border because he's just too busy.
Do you have plans to visit the southern border?
I've been there before, and I haven't. I mean, I know it well. I guess I should go down, but the whole point of it is I haven't had a whole hell of a lot of time to get down.
Joe Biden doesn't have time to visit the border. Meanwhile, according to the White House, Joe Biden's going to spend this weekend on vacation in Delaware. The only conclusion anybody can reasonably draw from all of this is that Joe Biden isn't really running things. And Joe Biden himself, at various points last night, admitted that. Asked about inflation, including higher gas prices, Joe Biden straight up acknowledged that he has no idea what to do about it.
Do you have a timeline for gas prices of when you think they may start coming down?
My guess is you'll start to see gas prices come down as we get by and going into the winter, into next year in 2022. I don't see anything that's going to happen in the meantime that's going to significantly reduce gas prices. I don't have a near-term answer.
I don't have a near-term answer. In reality, Joe Biden's handlers have been begging OPEC to produce more oil and send it to us, and they've been refusing. That's the real near-term answer, and it's been a disaster. This country was energy independent when Joe Biden took office, and it's not anymore. It's not clear Joe Biden realizes that, but if there's one thing Joe Biden knows well, it's how to deflect from his own failures. That's instinctual for Joe Biden. He doesn't even need to know where he is or what's happening around him. He'll just do it. So last night, Joe Biden identified the real threat this country's facing: first responders and police officers. They're refusing to take the COVID vaccine, so they're to blame for all that's wrong with America, Joe Biden said, and they should be fired.
As many as 1 in 3 emergency responders in some cities like Chicago, Los Angeles, right here in Baltimore, are refusing to comply with city vaccine mandates. I'm wondering where you stand on that. Should police officers, emergency responders, be mandated to get vaccines? And if not, should they be stay at home or let go?
Yes and yes.
You hear that applause right there? And you realize that a lot of people are willing to put up with a dementia patient in the White House as long as he destroys their political opponents. Last night's town hall demonstrated, among other things, that authoritarianism is far more popular in the Democratic Party than most Americans realize. Remember when Donald Trump warned the Democrats were going to start destroying statues of our founding fathers? Donald Trump was mocked for that. But last night, Joe Biden said he'd be okay with destroying statues of Thomas Jefferson, and no one even batted an eye.
New York City is removing a statue of Thomas Jefferson from its legislative chamber because of Jefferson's history as a slaveholder. Do you support that decision?
Well, I think that's up to the locality to decide what they want to do on that.
Thomas Jefferson was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, the document that freed Americans from Great Britain. Now, a lot of Democrats want Thomas Jefferson's statue destroyed, and Joe Biden isn't going to stop them. Are you surprised by that? You shouldn't be. At one point, the town hall audience last night laughed at the very idea of freedom. You want your constitutional and God-given right to self-determination? Joe Biden and his followers think it's a punchline.
Look, the two things that concern me, one are those who just try to make this a political issue. Freedom. I have the freedom to kill you with my COVID. No, I mean, come on, freedom.
This kind of thing happened again and again. Later on, Joe Biden again suggested getting rid of the filibuster, and the crowd loved it. As long as he's talking about crushing his political enemies, they're on board. They'll forgive anything, even obvious lies. For weeks, Joe Biden has claimed that this network, Fox News, mandates that its employees take the COVID shot. That's never been true. But last night, Joe Biden once again repeated the lie.
Things I find. Do you realize they mandate vaccinations?
At Fox headquarters.
Yeah. I find that mildly fascinating.
You find that mildly fascinating?
Mildly fascinating.
And the crowd just nods their heads. The moderator agrees. No one corrects the lie. To be clear, not a single person has been fired from Fox for refusing to get vaccinated, period. After this town hall, two things are clear. First, Joe Biden's not capable of thinking clearly, and most Americans recognize that. You can't watch these clips and come to any other conclusion. but as a way to signal the authority of our actual leaders, the authoritarians who write the executive orders and pass the legislation, last night's town hall was an unequivocal success. It turns out that their agenda is more popular among Democrats than we thought. Many Democrats now applaud disinformation. They cheer for authoritarianism. They don't care if their dictator lies about visiting the border or thinks he's driving a car in the middle of a nationally televised town hall. They just want a dictator.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.